Confirmation bias reinforcement. Imagine two people watching the same news story. One believes the government is corrupt, the other thinks it's doing a great job. They both walk away from the broadcast feeling more convinced than ever that they're right. How? Because they only paid attention to the parts that supported what they already believed. That's confirmation bias, the brain's built-in filter that makes us see only what we want to see, while ignoring everything else. And here's the dark part. Once someone understands how this works, they can use it to trap you inside your own beliefs. One of the most infamous examples: cults. They don't try to convince new recruits that everything they say is true. Instead, they just subtly reinforce ideas that recruits already suspect. If someone is disillusioned with society, the cult doesn't argue with them. It amplifies that frustration, feeding them only the information that makes them angrier at the outside world. Eventually, they stop questioning and only accept ideas that confirm what the cult wants them to believe. The same principle is used in politics. Ever wonder why people get sucked into echo chambers? It's because reinforcing confirmation bias is more powerful than changing someone's mind. Social media algorithms are built on this. If you click on an article that aligns with your opinion, your feed floods with more of the same, reinforcing your views over and over. Over time, it creates the illusion that everyone agrees with you, because anything that contradicts your beliefs is filtered out before you even see it. And it doesn't stop at politics or cults. It's everywhere. Think about conspiracy theories. Once someone believes the Earth is flat, any evidence proving them wrong is dismissed as a cover-up. The more you try to argue, the deeper they dig into their belief, because their brain is actively rejecting anything that challenges it. Marketers and scammers know how to exploit this too. They don't sell you a product by convincing you it works. Instead, they find people who already suspect it works and give them proof that confirms their suspicions. Testimonials, selective data, and emotionally charged language make sure you focus on only the positive results, ignoring anything that contradicts them. Even in everyday relationships, this trick is used to manipulate people. A toxic partner doesn't try to convince you that they're perfect. Instead, they feed into your existing fears, whether it's self-doubt, abandonment issues, or insecurity. They make sure that any situation can be twisted to confirm what you already fear. See, everyone leaves you in the end. Over time, this erodes your ability to see reality clearly because your brain starts filtering out anything that contradicts those fears. Confirmation bias doesn't just make us ignore the truth, it makes us actively fight against it. Once you're caught in its grip, even undeniable facts feel like an attack. People don't just hold on to false beliefs, they defend them, because admitting they're wrong feels like a personal threat. That's why the most effective manipulators don't try to argue with you. They don't present new evidence or force you to believe something different. They simply control the flow of information, making sure that everything you see and hear confirms what they want you to believe. And once that happens, they don't need to change your mind. You'll do that yourself. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. You ever notice that the moment you learn about something, it suddenly starts appearing everywhere? You hear a weird phrase for the first time, and now it's in every conversation. You see a rare car on the street, and now it's parked on every corner. It's not magic. It's not a conspiracy. It's a psychological trick your own brain plays on you, and it can be weaponized against you. This is called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as frequency illusion. Once your brain latches onto a concept, it starts filtering the world differently. The information was always there, but your mind is now tuned to recognize it, and that makes it feel like reality itself is changing. Here's where it gets dark. This psychological quirk can be exploited to manipulate what you believe, how you think, and even how you behave, without you realizing it. Let's say someone wants to control a narrative. They introduce an idea subtly. Maybe you see a tweet, overhear a conversation, or watch a video casually mentioning it. At first, it means nothing. But then you start noticing it everywhere. It's in news headlines, social media feeds, casual discussions, and suddenly, it feels like a universal truth. But it's not. It's just your brain being hacked. Marketers use this to sell products. A brand makes sure you randomly encounter their name multiple times a day, making it feel more popular than it actually is. Politicians use it to push ideologies. One repeated phrase, one carefully planted idea, and suddenly it feels like the whole world believes it. Cult leaders, they plant a concept in your mind, reinforce it subtly, and soon it's impossible to ignore. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon makes it alarmingly easy to distort reality. And the worst part? It doesn't even feel like manipulation. It feels natural. Your brain convinces you that you discovered this pattern on your own, that the world is confirming it for you. That's what makes it so dangerous. So the next time something suddenly seems to be everywhere, pause. Ask yourself, is this really happening? Or is someone, somewhere, making sure I see it? Exploiting mirror neurons. You yawn when someone else yawns. You laugh when a room erupts in laughter. Your brain isn't just observing, it's mirroring. And while this instinct fuels human connection, it can also be turned against you in ways you'd never suspect. At the core of this manipulation are mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire not just when you act, but when you see someone else acting. These neurons are why you flinch when someone gets hurt, or instinctively smile when someone smiles at you. They're the foundation of empathy, bonding, and social influence. But like any powerful tool, they can be weaponized. One of the most infamous examples, the rise of Adolf Hitler. Hitler didn't just give speeches, he mirrored the emotions of his audience. He reflected their fears, frustrations, and hopes back at them. His speeches weren't just words, they were emotional feedback loops amplified by the crowd's response. He didn't persuade with logic, he made people feel. And once emotion takes over, critical thinking shuts down. But mirroring doesn't need a massive crowd to work. Salespeople, politicians, cult leaders, and con artists use it constantly. A manipulator will subtly copy your posture, tone, and gestures to make you feel at ease. Your brain registers the similarity and assumes, this person is like me, I can trust them. It's why a skilled con artist can make you spill your secrets within minutes of meeting them. They're not just listening, they're reflecting you back to yourself. And this trick goes deeper. Mirroring can manufacture attraction and loyalty. Studies show that when someone subtly mimics your body language, you're more likely to like them, trust them, and agree with them, even if you just met. This is how toxic relationships begin. An abuser may start by mirroring their victim's personality, interests, and values, creating an illusion of perfect compatibility. But once that bond is established, the manipulation shifts. The abuser no longer mirrors, but controls, knowing their victim is too emotionally invested to leave. And this trick isn't just used by individuals. It's built into the systems we interact with every day. Social media algorithms act as digital mirror neurons. Ever notice how platforms feed you content that aligns with your existing beliefs? That's not an accident. The algorithm reflects back what you already think and feel, strengthening your biases and filtering out anything that challenges them. Over time, this creates echo chambers, polarization, and an inability to see other perspectives. So how do you protect yourself? First, recognize when you're being mirrored. If someone copies your mannerisms too closely or reflects your emotions too perfectly, pause and question their intentions. Second, disrupt the pattern. Change your posture, shift topics, or introduce an unexpected idea. A genuine person will flow naturally with the conversation. A manipulator will struggle. They rely on predictability to maintain control. Mirror neurons make us human. They help us connect, learn, and empathize. But in the wrong hands, they become a tool for manipulation, turning your own instincts against you. And the most terrifying part? When done well, you won't even realize it's happening. pacing and leading. You ever meet someone who just gets you? Someone who seems to be on your wavelength, saying the right things, making you feel like they understand you better than most. You trust them, maybe even follow their advice because, well, it feels natural. But what if that was engineered? What if they weren't just understanding you, but leading you, without you even realizing it? This is called pacing and leading, a psychological technique used in persuasion, manipulation, and even mind control. It works by first matching the person's thoughts, emotions, or behaviors, pacing them, before subtly shifting them toward a desired outcome. Done correctly, it makes people agree, comply, or follow without resistance. Ever noticed how cult leaders, con artists, or even politicians start by mirroring the frustrations of their audience? I know how you feel. You're tired. You've been ignored. You've been mistreated. That's pacing, acknowledging and aligning with the target's current reality. And once trust is established, they begin to lead. And that's why you need to listen to me. I have the solution. Follow me. It's used in everyday life too. Salespeople pace by repeating your concerns before guiding you toward a purchase. Interrogators gain compliance by mirroring body language, speech, and emotional state before steering responses. Even in relationships, someone might first agree with your feelings, making you feel safe, before shaping your choices. And here's what makes it dangerous. It feels natural. The manipulation isn't forced, it's welcomed. You think you're making decisions, but in reality, your choices have been pre-scripted, introduced so smoothly that by the time you realize what's happening, you're already 2 steps ahead on a path you never chose. Neuro-linguistic programming. Ever had a conversation where someone seemed to be guiding your thoughts without you even realizing it? Where, before you knew it, you were agreeing, nodding along, and feeling strangely compelled to trust their perspective? That wasn't an accident. That was a technique. Neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, a set of psychological tricks so subtle, so effective, that entire industries have been built on them. At its core, NLP is about influencing people's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors through language and subconscious cues. It works by detecting patterns in speech, body language, and mental associations, then subtly steering them toward a desired conclusion. Used ethically, it's marketed as a way to improve communication, confidence, and persuasion. Used maliciously, it can be a tool for manipulation, deception, and even control. One of the most well-known examples, the embedded command, a hypnotic technique where a request is disguised within a casual sentence. Instead of directly telling someone, "You should trust me," an NLP practitioner might say, "You might not even realize it yet, but you're starting to trust what I'm saying." The suggestion is planted. The mind processes it without resistance. Another tactic, mirroring. When someone subtly mimics your posture, speech patterns, and energy level, your brain interprets it as familiarity. You instinctively trust them without even knowing why. Cult leaders use it to build deep rapport. High-pressure salespeople use it to lower your defenses. It's why you sometimes feel connected to someone you've only just met. But the most chilling NLP trick is anchoring, associating an emotion with a specific word, gesture, or stimulus. If a manipulator repeatedly makes you feel safe whenever they use a certain phrase, your brain links that feeling to them. Later, even when they're being deceptive, that same phrase triggers trust. The real danger of NLP isn't just that it works, it's that you won't even know it's happening. Subliminal messaging. You think you're in control of your thoughts, your choices, your beliefs. But what if I told you that right now, as you listen to this, there are messages being planted in your mind? Messages you'll never consciously register, but will still influence your decisions? Subliminal messaging isn't science fiction. It's real, it's powerful, and it's been used for decades to manipulate people without them ever realizing it. The most infamous example? The 1957 Coca-Cola experiment. A market researcher named James Vickery claimed he had flashed the words, "Drink Coca-Cola" and "Eat popcorn" on a movie screen for just a fraction of a second, too fast for conscious awareness, but just enough for the subconscious to absorb it. He later reported that concession sales skyrocketed. The world panicked. People feared they were being hypnotized into buying things against their will. While Vickery later admitted to falsifying the results, the concept itself wasn't a lie. In fact, advertising agencies, political campaigns, and even intelligence agencies have since experimented with subliminal techniques because they work. At its core, subliminal messaging is about bypassing critical thinking. The conscious mind filters information, but the subconscious mind absorbs everything. When an image, phrase, or idea is subtly repeated, it embeds itself into your mind without resistance. Later, when you're making a decision, you'll feel a strange, unexplained pull toward a certain choice because it has been implanted in your thoughts. One way this is used: hidden imagery in advertisements. Fast food brands have been caught placing visual triggers, suggestive shapes, familiar symbols, even hidden words, to make their food look more appealing. Political campaigns use color psychology and background music to create emotions that subtly sway opinions. Even social media algorithms play a role, nudging people towards certain viewpoints by subtly reinforcing what they want you to see. But it gets worse. Subliminal messaging isn't just visual, it's auditory too. Certain sounds, embedded at barely perceptible levels in music or commercials, can trigger specific emotional responses. Some studies suggest that low-frequency sounds can induce unease, while higher frequencies can create a sense of urgency or excitement. Have you ever walked into a store and suddenly felt compelled to shop longer? That could be carefully designed background music manipulating your brain into staying, browsing, and buying. And then there's priming. You see something subtle, an image, a phrase, a color, without realizing its impact. Later, when you encounter a related situation, your brain fills in the gaps and nudges you toward the outcome it's been preconditioned to expect. Casinos do this all the time. Bright flashing lights, the constant sound of slot machines winning, no clocks, no windows. It's all engineered to make you lose track of time and keep spending. Perhaps the darkest part of subliminal messaging is how seamlessly it integrates into everyday life. News outlets use subtle word choices to shape narratives. Social media platforms carefully curate your feed to reinforce your beliefs. Even in relationships, people can use subliminal reinforcement to manipulate their partners, gradually altering their perception of reality. So, the question is, how much of your thinking is actually yours? How many choices have you made that were subtly engineered without you even realizing it? The most unsettling part about subliminal messaging isn't that it exists, it's that you may never truly know when it's working on you. Priming effects. You walk into a store and soft classical music is playing. You feel a little more refined, maybe a bit more willing to splurge. Later, you're at a restaurant and the menu has elegant cursive font. Suddenly, the higher-priced dishes seem more appealing. You think you're making decisions freely, but in reality, you've been primed. Priming is one of the most subtle, yet powerful psychological tricks. It's the process of implanting an idea into your mind without you realizing it, making you more likely to think, feel, or act in a certain way. It doesn't require force, persuasion, or even awareness. It's a whisper to your subconscious, guiding your decisions before you even know you're making them. One of the most famous examples of priming in action: the old age experiment. Researchers had participants unscramble sentences containing words like wrinkled, bingo, and Florida. Afterward, they timed how long it took them to walk down a hallway. The result? Those exposed to age-related words walked significantly slower, without realizing why. Their minds had been primed to feel older, and their bodies responded accordingly. This trick is everywhere. Supermarkets place fresh flowers near the entrance to make you associate the store with freshness and quality. Political ads repeat the same phrases over and over until they become familiar, and therefore more believable. Job interviewers are influenced by words they saw earlier in the day. If they read about failure, they might judge a candidate more harshly. Priming works because the brain loves patterns. It's constantly looking for connections, even when none exist. If you hear the word yellow, you'll recognize banana faster than if you heard an unrelated word. If you see a brand logo frequently enough, you start to feel like you trust it, even if you've never bought their product. But here's where it gets darker. Priming isn't just about nudging choices. It can be used to control narratives and perceptions. News headlines carefully choose words to set the tone of a story before you even read the details. A crime report using youth instead of gang makes the event feel different. A company calling layoffs right-sizing makes job losses sound like a strategic move rather than a failure. And it gets worse. In legal cases, a single priming word can sway a jury. When witnesses are asked, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other? They estimate higher speeds than if asked, how fast was it going when it bumped into the other? One word, smashed, was enough to distort their memory. Social media feeds priming effects constantly. Every like, every suggested post, every trending topic. It's all shaping how you think before you even form your own opinion. Even a simple change in font or color can influence emotions. Studies show that people primed with the color red tend to perform worse on tests, likely because red is unconsciously linked to danger and correction. The most dangerous part, once primed, you rarely question it. If you're primed to see someone as untrustworthy, you'll interpret everything they do through that lens. If you're primed to expect a bad experience, you'll find reasons to confirm it. Priming doesn't just influence one moment, it reshapes how you filter reality. So ask yourself, how many of your thoughts are truly yours? And more importantly, how many of them were planted before you even realized it? Suggestive language and hypnosis. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone subtly led you to a decision, one you thought was entirely your own? Maybe you walked into a store, and before you knew it, you were convinced to buy something you didn't even need. You probably thought it was your own choice, but what if it wasn't? What if a few carefully chosen words could bypass your critical thinking and plant a decision in your mind before you even realize it? That's the power of suggestive language and hypnosis. A method so subtle, yet so effective, that it has been used to influence everything from courtroom testimonies to political speeches. It's not about swinging pocket watches or making people cluck like chickens. It's about shaping perception without resistance. Take the infamous 1970s case of the Lost in the Mall experiment. A psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus wanted to test how easily people's memories could be manipulated. She told participants a fake childhood story about being lost in a shopping mall, crying, and finally being rescued by a kind stranger. The catch? This never actually happened. Yet, many participants remembered the event in vivid detail. Their minds filled in the gaps, creating a false reality just because someone suggested it. That's the terrifying part of suggestive language. It doesn't need to be true to be effective. It just needs to be framed in a way that your brain accepts it as truth. Now, combine this with hypnosis, and you have something even more unsettling. Hypnosis isn't about mind control. It's about lowering psychological defenses. It puts a person in a state of hyper-focus and relaxation, where suggestions slip in without triggering resistance. In this state, someone can be guided to believe, feel, or even remember things that never actually happened. It works through embedded commands, phrases hidden within normal conversation. A politician might say, "When you step into that voting booth, you'll feel a strong sense of trust in our leadership." The key phrase, feel a strong sense of trust. It's not an argument, it's a suggestion, one your brain processes without questioning. Marketing and sales use this constantly. A waiter asking, "Would you like the steak or the seafood special?" is subtly removing your ability to say no. The question assumes you're ordering. It's just a matter of what. And then there's the yes ladder technique. Small agreements prime people for larger ones. A classic car salesman trick. Start with minor commitments. This is a nice car, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great to drive something this reliable? You'd probably love how smooth the handling feels, right? Each small yes makes the next one feel natural. By the time the contract is in front of you, your brain is wired to agree. But here's where it gets even darker. Suggestive language can be used to alter memories, behaviors, and even identities. Cult leaders, con artists, and even interrogators use these techniques to shape narratives. Frame a question the right way, and you can change someone's reality. Police interrogations have led to false confessions using suggestive language. A suspect repeatedly told, "You don't remember it now, but memory comes back in pieces," may start doubting their own innocence. Their mind tries to reconcile the contradiction. Eventually, it's easier to just believe they did it. And once a suggestion takes hold, it's nearly impossible to undo. That's the true horror of it. A single phrase, a carefully worded statement, a slight shift in tone, it can rewrite someone's perception of reality forever. So, how many of your beliefs are actually yours? And how many were planted there without you ever realizing it? Creating a sense of urgency. Imagine this. You're scrolling through an online store when you see the perfect item, but then a bold red timer appears beneath it. Only 2 left in stock. Sale ends in 3 minutes. Your heart rate spikes. You don't have time to think. If you hesitate, you might lose it forever. So, you buy it. And just like that, you've been played. This is the power of urgency manipulation, one of the most effective ways to control human behavior. It bypasses rational thinking and forces people to act on impulse. The worst part, you probably won't even realize you've been manipulated. A perfect real-world example. The 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast. When Orson Welles performed a fictional alien invasion as a news-style broadcast, thousands of people panicked. Why? Because it felt immediate. They didn't have time to think critically. Reports of alien attacks spread before anyone even questioned if it was real. That's what urgency does. It hijacks your brain and forces immediate action. So how does this psychological trick work? It plays on loss aversion, a bias where people fear losing something more than they desire gaining it. The idea that an opportunity is slipping away triggers anxiety, which clouds judgment. Marketers use it constantly. Limited time offer, flash sale, only a few left in stock. These phrases aren't just information, they're psychological weapons. Suddenly, buying isn't a choice, it's a race. And the moment you feel rushed, you've already lost. But it gets even darker. Cults, scammers, and con artists rely on urgency to trap victims before they can think clearly. Pyramid schemes, for example, push recruits into making fast financial commitments. Act now, or you'll miss your chance to be rich. The pressure forces decisions without scrutiny. By the time the person realizes, they're already in too deep. Even politicians and media outlets weaponize urgency. Fear-mongering headlines, emergency press conferences, breaking news alerts, all designed to provoke immediate emotional reactions. When people are afraid, they don't stop to verify facts. That's when misinformation spreads the fastest. Think about how wars start, how stock markets crash, how riots explode overnight. It's almost always a manufactured sense of urgency. When emotions take control, rational thought shuts down, and that's the moment people become the easiest to manipulate. The most disturbing part, urgency feels natural. It feels like you're making the right decision when, in reality, someone else has already made it for you. So the next time you see a countdown timer, an urgent warning, or someone pushing you to act immediately, pause. Because the moment you feel rushed, you might already be under someone else's control. Foot in the door technique. Let's start with a simple question. Would you put a tiny sticker on your window to support a cause you believe in? Seems harmless, right? It's just a sticker. But what if, a few weeks later, the same organization asked you to put up a full-size sign in your front yard? Statistically, you're far more likely to say yes, simply because you said yes to the first, much smaller request. And just like that, you've fallen into one of the most insidious psychological traps: the foot in the door technique. This trick is terrifyingly effective because it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your own decision. One of the most famous real-world examples, the 1974 Patty Hearst case. Patty, the heiress to a newspaper empire, was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, a radical militant group. Initially, she was terrified, but her captors didn't force her to pledge loyalty overnight. They started small, forcing her to record a message condemning her family. Then she participated in minor activities. And before long, she was robbing banks alongside her captors, fully believing in their cause. How does this work? The trick exploits consistency bias, our deep psychological need to stay consistent with our past behavior. If we agree to a small request, we subconsciously align ourselves with that choice. When a bigger request follows, our brain justifies compliance by thinking, "I already said yes once, so this must be the right thing to do." Advertisers use this constantly. Ever wondered why free trials exist? Once you've used a service for a few weeks, you feel committed. The thought of cancelling, even if you don't really need it, feels like going back on your own decision. It's also a weapon in high-pressure sales. First, they convince you to just take a test drive. Then, just sit down and talk numbers. Before you know it, you're signing papers, trapped by the momentum of your own compliance. And in darker cases, this is how cults and extremist groups recruit. They don't ask for absolute loyalty up front. Instead, they start with something small: attend a meeting, sign a petition, donate a small amount. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to say no. Because once you take that first step, you're already walking down the path they chose for you. Think about this the next time someone asks for a small favor. The request itself might not be the real trap. It's what comes after that you should be worried about. Door in the face technique. Let's say a charity worker approaches you on the street and asks, "Would you be willing to donate $500 to help struggling families?" That's a big ask. You probably hesitate, feel a little awkward, and then say no. But then they follow up with, "Okay, totally understandable. How about just $20? That second request suddenly feels so much smaller, more reasonable, and without realizing it, you reach into your pocket and hand over the cash. You just fell for one of the most powerful compliance techniques in psychology, the door in the face technique. This trick works because of something deeply embedded in human psychology: reciprocal concessions. When someone lowers their demand after an initial rejection, we feel pressured to meet them halfway. It's as if we now owe them something, just because they made a compromise. It's been tested in countless studies. In one famous experiment, researchers first asked students to commit to volunteering 2 hours a week for 2 years at a juvenile detention center. Every single person declined. But then, they immediately followed up with a much smaller request. "Okay, would you at least be willing to chaperone a group of kids on a one-day trip to the zoo?" 3 times as many students agreed to the second request compared to when it was asked outright. Why? Because after saying no to the extreme request, the smaller one felt like an easy favor in comparison. And this technique is everywhere. Think about negotiations. A salesperson might start with an outrageous price, only to generously bring it down to a number they wanted all along, making you feel like you scored a deal. It's also a favorite tactic in law enforcement and interrogation techniques. A detective might push a suspect with an extreme accusation, maybe even falsely implying a life-ruining punishment, only to then offer a much lesser charge if they confess. Faced with the horrifying first option, the second one feels like an escape. But in reality, it's a trap. On a darker scale, this is how manipulative people and organizations operate. Cults, high control groups, and even abusive relationships exploit this principle to break people down. First, they demand absolute obedience or extreme sacrifice, something impossible. But when they relent, and ask for just a little loyalty, just a small compromise, it suddenly feels manageable. And just like that, you're in. Because the real trick isn't about getting what they ask for, it's about making you feel like saying yes was your idea. Lowballing. You walk into a car dealership excited to buy your first car. The salesperson greets you with a warm smile and says, "Good news! We have a special deal today. This car, fully loaded, for just $20,000. That's within your budget." You shake hands, feel the thrill of the purchase, and start picturing yourself behind the wheel. But just as you're about to sign the paperwork, the salesperson frowns and says, "I just checked with my manager. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. That price doesn't include some mandatory fees. It's actually $23,000. At this point, you're already mentally committed to the car. You've imagined owning it, maybe even bragged to friends about the deal you got. So instead of walking away, you agree to the new price. You just got lowballed. This psychological trick is devastatingly effective. It works by getting you to commit to something before the full cost is revealed. Once you've made a decision, even based on misleading information, you become emotionally and mentally invested. Backing out now feels like a loss, even though the terms have changed. One of the most famous studies on lowballing involved college students. Psychologists asked them to participate in a study. Most agreed. But after they committed, they were informed the study required them to show up at 7 a.m. Even though that's an inconvenient time, most stuck with their original decision instead of backing out. This tactic isn't just for sales. It's used in jobs, negotiations, and even relationships. A recruiter might promise a dream job with a high salary, only for the offer to suddenly include longer hours, lower pay, or extra responsibilities. In more manipulative scenarios, lowballing is used to control people. A cult or extremist group might invite someone in with seemingly harmless requests. Attend a seminar, listen to a speech, meet some people. But after committing, they're slowly asked for more and more. By the time they realize how deep they're in, they've already accepted so many conditions that turning back feels impossible. Because the real danger of lowballing? It's not just about losing money, it's about losing control. Bandwagon effect manipulation. It starts with a simple thought. Everyone else is doing it, so it must be right. That's the bandwagon effect in action. The psychological trick that exploits your deepest, most primitive fear, the fear of being left out. It's what makes people follow trends, believe in misinformation, and conform to ideas they've never even questioned. Think about the Salem witch trials. In the late 1600s, a few accusations of witchcraft spiraled into mass hysteria, leading to dozens of executions. Why? Because people saw their neighbors turning on each other, and instead of questioning the madness, they joined in. When the crowd moves in one direction, standing against it feels impossible. At its core, the bandwagon effect is simple. When enough people adopt a belief or behavior, others follow. Not because they logically agree, but because they fear being left behind. It's why financial bubbles form. Think of the 2008 housing crisis. People kept investing in real estate, watching prices climb higher and higher. Everyone else was doing it, so it must have been safe, right? Until the bubble popped and the economy collapsed. It's why propaganda works. When a government wants to push an idea, they don't need to convince everyone. They just need enough people to believe it. Once the illusion of consensus is created, the rest follow. And here's where it gets dark. The bandwagon effect is actively weaponized. Advertisers use it to manipulate consumer behavior, making people feel that if they don't buy a product, they're missing out. Social media algorithms exploit it, amplifying content that already has engagement. Because if thousands of people like a post, others are more likely to believe it, even if it's false. Politicians manufacture public approval by staging rallies with paid crowds, creating the illusion of widespread support. It bypasses critical thinking. People stop questioning whether something is right, logical, or even true. They just go along with it. The more people follow, the stronger the effect becomes, snowballing into mass conformity. And once you're on the bandwagon, you don't even realize it. You become convinced it was your choice all along, creating a sense of scarcity. Ever noticed how the moment something seems limited, exclusive, or hard to get, you suddenly want it more? It doesn't matter whether it's a luxury car, a rare sneaker drop, or even someone's attention. Scarcity makes things irresistible. And here's the disturbing part. It's one of the most exploited psychological tricks in existence. Think about Black Friday. Every year, people trample over each other for discounted TVs and microwaves, not because they desperately need them, but because they've been told supplies are running out. Stores manufacture scarcity, creating the illusion of high demand. It doesn't matter if the same product is available next week. In that moment, people act impulsively, driven by fear of missing out. This trick hijacks your brain at the deepest level. When something is scarce, your survival instincts kick in. Thousands of years ago, scarcity meant life or death. If food, water, or shelter was limited, you fought for it. That instinct still lingers today, making you irrationally chase anything that seems rare, even if you don't need it. It's why luxury brands limit production. The fewer handbags, the more people crave them. It's why social media influencers post exclusive content behind paywalls. The illusion of scarcity makes it seem more valuable. And it's why dating apps make people obsessed over someone who isn't available. The less you can have them, the more you want them. But this psychological trick isn't just about selling products. It's been used to manipulate entire societies. Totalitarian regimes restrict information, making people desperate for what they can't access. Cult leaders use it to control followers, convincing them that only they have the truth, and the outside world offers nothing. And the most unsettling part? Scarcity makes people blind to logic. When you believe something is slipping away, you stop asking if you even want it in the first place. Exploiting the need for closure. Some questions never stop echoing in the back of your mind. Why did they leave? What really happened? What was the truth? That gnawing uncertainty, that feeling of unfinished business, it's not just a minor frustration. It's a powerful psychological force known as the need for closure. And when someone understands just how much you crave a definitive answer, they can use that against you in ways you'd never expect. The need for closure is a fundamental part of human cognition. Our brains hate loose ends. When something is unresolved, our minds work overtime trying to make sense of it. We fill in the gaps, we create explanations, we latch onto anything that gives us a sense of finality. And this is exactly where manipulation begins. Take relationships, for example. Have you ever heard of someone staying obsessed with an ex, not because they want them back, but because they never got a real explanation for why things ended? That's the power of an open psychological loop. When a breakup happens abruptly, without clear reasoning, it leaves a hole in the person's mind. They replay every interaction, searching for clues, obsessing over possible answers. And if the person who left them hanging ever returns, even with a weak or dishonest excuse, their brain grabs onto it just to satisfy that desperate need for closure. Manipulators know this. They disappear suddenly, only to return later with vague explanations, knowing their victims will be too relieved to question the lies. But this tactic isn't just used in personal relationships. It's weaponized on a much larger scale. Look at cults. One of the most effective ways cult leaders keep their followers under control is by dangling half-revealed secrets. They tell their followers that they're on the verge of learning something life-changing, but they just need to prove themselves first. That proof? It's endless. More loyalty, more obedience, more sacrifice. But the truth is, there is no great secret. Just a psychological trick to keep people trapped in an endless cycle of searching. Even in politics, the need for closure is one of the most powerful tools of mass persuasion. Political propaganda often thrives on ambiguity. A politician might claim, "There's something they're not telling you," or "The real story is out there if you look hard enough." They don't provide facts, just enough uncertainty to make people start filling in the blanks themselves. And here's the dark part. When people are forced to create their own explanations, they tend to believe them more strongly than actual facts. Marketers also use this trick every single day. Cliffhangers, vague advertisements, mysterious teasers, all designed to keep you hooked. Ever noticed how TV shows end with unresolved plot lines? Or how a brand hints at an exciting product reveal but gives no details? They do this because they know your mind won't let it go. You'll keep thinking about it, looking for clues, searching for answers, until you give in and buy whatever they're selling. But here's where it gets really unsettling. Our need for closure makes us accept any answer, even if it's false. Studies show that when people are desperate for resolution, they become far more susceptible to misinformation, conspiracy theories, and outright lies. It's easier to believe a convenient lie than to live with lingering uncertainty. This is why cult members cling to false teachings, why people fall for scams, and why entire populations can be led to believe completely fabricated narratives. And the worst part? The more we seek closure, the easier we are to manipulate. The more we demand answers, the more control we give to those willing to provide them. Because in the end, whoever controls the answers controls the mind. Micromanipulation. Imagine this. You're in a conversation. Everything feels normal, but after a few minutes, your thoughts shift. You start questioning your choices, feeling guilty for things you never second-guessed before. The person across from you never raised their voice, never made a direct demand. And yet, somehow, they've nudged your mind in a completely different direction, without you even realizing it. This is micro-manipulation, the subtle, almost imperceptible tactics that control people's decisions, beliefs, and behaviors without them noticing. Unlike obvious coercion or deception, micromanipulation works like slow poison, drip by drip, small adjustments that push you exactly where they want you. Take the foot in the door tactic, a classic in sales and persuasion. A company might first ask you to sign a harmless petition, something that aligns with your values. Then, days later, they come back asking for a donation. Because you've already said yes once, your brain leans toward consistency. You don't realize it, but that tiny first agreement was a setup, conditioning you to comply with a bigger request later. But micromanipulation isn't just about persuasion, it's about control. In toxic relationships, manipulators use this trick masterfully. Imagine a partner who never outright demands obedience, but instead raises an eyebrow, sighs at the right moment, or gives a subtle pause before responding. Over time, these tiny cues make you adjust your behavior to avoid their disapproval, even if they never explicitly asked you to change. Workplace environments can be just as dangerous. Ever had a boss who casually mentioned how another employee stayed late to finish a project? They never directly told you to work extra hours, but suddenly you feel obligated. This is how micromanipulation works, planting ideas without stating them outright. And then there's social conditioning. Micromanipulation is used on a massive scale in politics, advertising, and media. Consider how brands create artificial exclusivity. Only 5 left in stock, or this deal won't last. They're subtly influencing urgency, making you act without thinking. It's not manipulation in the way you expect, it's worse, because you still think you're making the choice yourself. One of the darkest applications of micromanipulation is in gaslighting. A manipulator doesn't need to outright call you crazy, they just need to question your memory, reframe the narrative, and downplay events subtly enough to make you doubt yourself. They might say, "I don't think I ever said that. Are you sure you're remembering correctly?" It sounds innocent enough, but over time, it erodes confidence, making the victim more pliable, more dependent. This is why micromanipulation is so terrifying. It doesn't look like manipulation at all. It feels like your own thoughts, your own decisions, your own reasoning. It works through gestures, phrasing, timing, and tone, all carefully calibrated to steer you in a specific direction. And the worst part, once someone masters micromanipulation, They can make you believe that their ideas were yours all along. The Zeigarnik effect. You ever notice how an unfinished task lingers in your mind like an itch you can't scratch? A song that cuts off before the final chorus, a movie that stops just before the climax. It's unbearable. Your brain refuses to let it go. That's the Zeigarnik effect, and it's one of the most sinister psychological tricks ever discovered. Now, imagine if someone weaponized that feeling, if they deliberately left things unresolved just to keep you hooked, anxious, and desperate for closure. This isn't just a psychological quirk. It's a tool of manipulation used everywhere from marketing to mind control. The effect is named after Bluma Zeigarnik, a Soviet psychologist who discovered something strange while observing waiters in a cafe. They could remember every detail of unpaid orders, but immediately forgot them once the bill was settled. In other words, the brain prioritizes unfinished business. Loose ends demand attention. Advertisers exploit this mercilessly. Think about cliffhangers in TV shows. Why does every episode end right when things get interesting? Because the brain hates incompleteness. It fixates on what's left unfinished, making you obsessively crave resolution. That's why people binge watch entire seasons. It's not just entertainment, it's a psychological trap. But the real darkness lies in how the Zeigarnik effect is used to control people. Cult leaders, manipulative partners, and even interrogators intentionally withhold closure to keep their victims mentally trapped. A toxic boss who keeps dangling a promotion just out of reach. A narcissist who disappears mid-conversation, leaving you desperate for an answer. A political figure who stirs fear, but never provides real solutions. They all rely on the same tactic. Leave the brain hanging, and it will chase the answer indefinitely. And the worst part? Most people never realize it's happening. The Pygmalion effect. Imagine a teacher walks into a classroom and secretly believes that half the students are geniuses and the other half are average. No one tells the students anything. No special treatment is given. Yet, by the end of the year, the genius students perform dramatically better than the others. Why? Because expectations alone shape their reality. This is the Pygmalion effect, and when used strategically, it can mold people like clay, without them even realizing it. The name comes from the Greek myth of Pygmalion, a sculptor who fell in love with a statue he created, which then came to life. In psychology, it refers to how beliefs influence behavior. When someone expects greatness from you, you unconsciously rise to meet it. But the reverse is also true. Low expectations create failure before it even begins. A famous real-world example, the Rosenthal and Jacobson experiment in the 1960s. Researchers told teachers that certain students, randomly chosen, were intellectual bloomers, expected to excel. The teachers unknowingly treated these students differently, offering them more encouragement, patience, and subtle signals of belief. By the end of the year, those students actually became smarter, scoring significantly higher on IQ tests. Now think about how dangerous this becomes when manipulated. A controlling boss subtly implies you're incompetent, making you second-guess your abilities until you actually start underperforming. A toxic partner keeps telling you you're lucky to have them, eroding your self-worth so you never consider leaving. Even entire social groups can be influenced. If people are constantly told they're inferior, they may start to believe it and act accordingly. The Pygmalion effect isn't just about belief, it's about how expectations shape destinies. And the most terrifying part? It happens so gradually, you never realize it's controlling you until it's too late. Reframing failure. Reframing failure is one of the most subtle yet devastating psychological tricks. It's a way to manipulate how you perceive your own mistakes, making you feel powerless, incompetent, or even guilty. When failure is framed the right way, it stops being a simple setback and becomes something far worse, proof that you are not enough. And once that idea takes root, it can control every decision you make. Imagine growing up in an environment where every mistake you make isn't just a mistake. It's a sign that you are fundamentally flawed. You didn't just fail a test, you disappointed your parents, You didn't just mess up a project, you embarrassed yourself in front of your boss. Reframing failure is all about shifting the meaning of your mistakes so that they aren't just temporary obstacles, but reflections of who you are as a person. And the more you believe that, the more control someone else has over you. Take the North Korean regime. In that society, failure isn't just about personal shortcomings, it's framed as betrayal. If you fail to meet work quotas, you're not just an unproductive worker, you're failing the state, your family, and your leader. You're an enemy of progress. That kind of reframing forces people into submission, because now their failures don't just belong to them, they have consequences for everyone around them. But this kind of manipulation isn't limited to extreme regimes. It happens in workplaces, relationships, and even everyday conversations. Have you ever worked for a boss who made you feel like every small mistake meant you weren't cut out for the job? That's not just criticism, it's reframing. Instead of failure being a step toward learning, it becomes a sign that you are inadequate. The more this is reinforced, the more people become afraid to take risks, speak up, or even leave toxic work environments. They aren't just scared of failing, they are scared that failure means they aren't good enough to succeed in the first place. It happens in relationships too. A manipulative partner can reframe failure in a way that makes you feel dependent on them. They might say things like, "See, you always do this," or "Maybe you're just not capable of being in a relationship." Suddenly, you don't just feel like you made a mistake, you start to believe that you are the mistake. Over time, this erodes confidence, making you feel like you're lucky to even be tolerated, let alone loved. And once that idea settles in, it's easy for someone to control you. One of the darkest aspects of this trick is how it makes people internalize the belief that they deserve their situation. If you can convince someone that failure is a reflection of their worth, they won't even try to change their circumstances. They'll stay in bad jobs, in abusive relationships, in toxic friendships, not because they want to, but because they've been made to believe that any attempt to leave will only end in more failure. And since failure is tied to their identity, they avoid it at all costs. The scariest part is that people don't even realize it's happening. They blame themselves instead of questioning the person or system that is feeding them this belief. They work harder, stay quieter, shrink themselves down just to avoid that crushing sense of failure. But here's the truth. Failure is not personal, it is not permanent, and most importantly, it is not defined by someone else. If someone else controls what failure means to you, they might just control you too. The halo effect. First impressions are powerful, but what if I told you they don't just shape how we feel about someone? They distort everything we see. That's the halo effect, a psychological trick so subtle yet so manipulative that it can make someone appear smarter, kinder, or even more trustworthy than they actually are, simply because of one positive trait. And once that halo is in place, it's nearly impossible to break free from its influence. Imagine you're in a courtroom, watching two different defendants on trial for the same crime. One is well-dressed, well-spoken, and carries themselves with confidence. The other looks disheveled, nervous, and avoids eye contact. Without knowing any details of the case, who seems more guilty to you? Studies show that attractive, confident individuals are more likely to be perceived as innocent, while those who appear nervous or less polished are assumed to be guilty, even if the evidence says otherwise. That's the halo effect in action. This trick works because the human brain is wired to take shortcuts. Instead of evaluating every aspect of a person, we latch onto one striking trait, like attractiveness, charm, or intelligence, and use it to assume everything else about them. If someone is physically attractive, we subconsciously believe they must also be kind, competent, and trustworthy. If someone speaks with confidence, we assume they must be knowledgeable. And if someone is in a position of power, we naturally believe they deserve to be there. It's why politicians can win elections based on charisma rather than policy. It's why serial manipulators get away with their lies. And it's why leaders who appear strong and authoritative are often blindly followed. even when their actions are questionable. The halo effect isn't just about perception, it actively shapes reality. Think about media coverage. Celebrities who are admired for their talent often get the benefit of the doubt when scandals emerge, while someone already viewed negatively is instantly condemned. It's not logic, it's the halo effect distorting judgment. Marketers exploit this trick to perfection. Ever wondered why luxury brands hire attractive, well-dressed models to promote their products? It's not just about selling clothes or watches. They know that if you associate their brand with beauty and status, you'll subconsciously assume the product itself is superior. You're not buying just a car, a perfume, or a suit. You're buying the illusion of prestige that surrounds it. But the darker side of the halo effect is its ability to shield dangerous individuals from scrutiny. Charismatic leaders can hide corruption behind their charm. Manipulative partners can make people ignore red flags simply because they seem caring at first. Even history's worst figures often had an aura of leadership that blinded people to their true nature until it was too late. The halo effect is one of the most insidious psychological tricks because it doesn't just fool people, it makes them confident in their false judgments. And once someone believes in an illusion, they'll defend it. Even when evidence contradicts their perception, they'll rationalize it away. He's a good guy. He wouldn't do that. She's so charming. She must be telling the truth. Breaking free from the halo effect means questioning first impressions. It means looking past charm, status, and appearances and asking, what am I not seeing? Because sometimes the people who seem the brightest are simply casting the longest shadows. Time constraints. Imagine you're in a high-end watch store, admiring an expensive timepiece. The salesperson leans in and whispers, "This is the last one in stock, and I can only hold this price for the next 5 minutes." Your heart races, the pressure builds. You weren't planning to buy anything today, but suddenly, waiting feels like losing. This is time constraint as a pressure tactic, and it's one of the most effective ways to make people act against their better judgment. When faced with a ticking clock, rational thinking is the first thing to collapse. The brain processes scarcity as a threat, a fear of missing out, of losing an opportunity that might never come again. In response, the body releases cortisol, spiking stress levels and making quick decisions feel like the only option. Marketers, con artists, and even cult leaders know this well. By artificially limiting time, they create a sense of urgency so intense that people feel forced to act before thinking. This trick works because of something called decision fatigue. When a person feels rushed, they don't have the luxury of weighing pros and cons. Instead, they rely on instinct. They default to the easiest, safest feeling choice, which is usually what the manipulator wanted all along. That's why limited time offers work so well in sales. It's why car dealerships claim a deal will expire by the end of the day, even though the same exclusive offer is still there the next week. But this tactic goes beyond sales. It's been used to control people on a massive scale. In high-pressure negotiations, leaders will impose last-minute deadlines, forcing their opponents to make rushed agreements. Cults and extremist groups use time constraints to trap recruits. Decide today, or this opportunity disappears forever. Even military interrogators have exploited time pressure, bombarding detainees with rapid questions, forcing them to respond before they can think critically. One of the most disturbing applications of this tactic is in scam culture. Ever heard of a high-stakes email scam? You receive a message claiming to be from a bank or government agency, warning you that your account is compromised. You have 10 minutes to respond, or your funds will be frozen. Rationally, you'd verify the claim. But the clock is ticking. The fear takes over. And before you know it, you've handed over sensitive information. But here's the darkest part. The illusion of urgency creates compliance. People who normally resist manipulation become highly suggestible under pressure. Studies have shown that when individuals believe they're on a time limit, they're far more likely to obey instructions. even if those instructions go against their morals, instincts, or common sense. So how do you resist this trap? The key is pausing. The moment you feel rushed, step back. Recognize that urgency is often manufactured. Ask yourself, is this really my last chance? Or is someone just making me feel like it is? Because the truth is, when someone pressures you to decide right now, it's usually because they don't want you to think at all. The contrast principle. Imagine you walk into a store to buy a new suit. The salesperson greets you with a warm smile and immediately brings out the most expensive option in the store, a designer suit that costs well beyond your budget. You shake your head, saying it's too much. But then, they show you a second suit, still pricey, but significantly cheaper than the first. Suddenly, this second suit seems like a bargain, and you convince yourself it's a great deal. Without realizing it, you've just fallen for the contrast principle, a psychological trick that alters how we perceive value, making things seem better or worse depending on what they are compared to. This principle works because our brains don't evaluate things in isolation. We understand value by comparison. A $100 shirt feels absurdly expensive if you've just been looking at $20 shirts. But if you've just been shown a $500 jacket, that same $100 shirt suddenly feels reasonable. This mental shortcut happens so fast that you don't even realize you're being influenced. It's one of the most effective persuasion tactics in existence. Salespeople, marketers, real estate agents, and even high-pressure negotiators use it constantly. Ever noticed how luxury car dealerships show you the most expensive models first? That's by design. After seeing a car that costs $100,000, a $60,000 car feels like a steal, even if it's still outrageously expensive. The contrast principle exploits your perception, not the actual value of what you're buying. But here's where it gets truly dark. This trick isn't just used in sales. It's used to manipulate behavior, decisions, and even how we judge people. Imagine a company introducing a terrible policy: longer work hours, fewer benefits. Employees revolt, refusing to accept it. Then, management compromises by offering a slightly less awful policy. Suddenly, employees feel relieved and accept the new conditions, even though they're still much worse than before. The trick. The second option was always the intended goal. The first one was just there to make it look better by comparison. This same technique is used in politics and media. Have you ever noticed how a particularly controversial law or policy is first introduced in its most extreme form? Outrage follows. People demand change. Then a less extreme version is proposed, and people breathe a sigh of relief. They accept it, not because it's good, but because it looks better in contrast to the worse option. And then there's the manipulation of human relationships. Let's say someone wants you to accept mistreatment or control. They might start by treating you terribly, being overly critical or distant. Then suddenly, they give you a small kindness, a compliment, a gift, a moment of attention. That kindness feels huge in comparison to the prior mistreatment, and suddenly you feel grateful, even loyal. This is textbook emotional manipulation, and it keeps people trapped in toxic relationships or social dynamics they would have rejected outright under normal circumstances. What makes this trick so insidious is that it feels completely natural. Your brain truly believes the second option is better. It doesn't feel like manipulation. And once this principle is in play, escaping it becomes nearly impossible unless you know what's happening. So how do you fight it? The key is absolute awareness. Whenever you're making a decision, ask yourself, am I judging this based on its actual value, or is something else influencing my perception? Because in the end, the real danger of the contrast principle isn't that people use it against you, it's that you might never even realize they did. The IKEA effect. There's a reason why people hold on to ugly homemade crafts, why parents cherish their child's clumsy school projects, and why assembling a piece of furniture makes it feel more valuable than something ready-made. It's not the quality, it's the effort. This is the IKEA effect, a psychological trick that makes people overvalue things they've put effort into. even if the final product isn't particularly good. The effect is named after the famous furniture company, IKEA, which sells affordable, flat-pack furniture that customers have to assemble themselves. The brilliance of this model isn't just about saving costs, it's about creating attachment. Studies show that when people build something with their own hands, they place a significantly higher value on it compared to something pre-assembled, even if the two are identical. The act of effort tricks the brain into forming an emotional bond with the object, making people less likely to discard it, return it, or acknowledge its flaws. But this trick isn't limited to furniture. Businesses, cults, and manipulators exploit the IKEA effect in ways that go beyond just making you overvalue a bookshelf. It's used in workplaces when employees are encouraged to contribute ideas that make them feel personally invested in the company's success, despite being underpaid or overworked. It's used in relationships where one person is constantly made to work for the approval of the other, deepening their attachment in a toxic dynamic. It's even used in cult indoctrination, where new members are given difficult or humiliating tasks to complete, increasing their emotional investment and making them less likely to question their beliefs. The IKEA effect is dangerous because it creates a psychological trap. The more effort you pour into something, the harder it becomes to walk away, even when logic says you should. This is why gamblers keep betting after losing money, why people stay in failing relationships long after the love is gone, and why employees remain loyal to toxic companies. The mind convinces itself that because so much work was put in, it must be worth it. And here's the real danger. This effect doesn't just apply to objects and relationships. It can shape entire belief systems, political ideologies, conspiracy theories, even dangerous movements. Once someone has invested time, effort, and personal identity into something, it becomes nearly impossible for them to let go. They'd rather twist reality to protect their belief than admit they wasted their effort on something meaningless. So the next time you feel deeply attached to something, ask yourself, do you truly value it? Or have you just put in too much work to walk away? The decoy effect. The next time you buy something, stop and ask yourself, did you actually choose this, or were you led to it? Because what if I told you that many of your decisions weren't really yours at all, but carefully engineered by an invisible trick known as the decoy effect? This psychological trick is so subtle, so effective, that corporations, advertisers, and even political strategists use it to guide your choices without you ever realizing it. It works by presenting you with three options, but one of them isn't really there to be picked. It's just bait to push you toward a specific decision. And once you see it in action, you'll start questioning every choice you've ever made. Let's take a simple example. You walk into a movie theater, and you're given two choices: a small popcorn for $3 or a large for $7. Most people might hesitate. $7 seems like a steep jump from $3, but now the theater adds a third option, a medium popcorn for $6.50. Suddenly, $7 for a large doesn't seem so bad anymore. That 50-cent difference makes the large feel like the obvious best deal. You were never meant to pick the medium. It was only there to steer you toward the large. This trick isn't just used in concession stands. You'll find it everywhere. In subscription services, where the best value plan sits comfortably next to an overpriced, intentionally unattractive alternative. In restaurants where menu pricing is designed to make a certain dish look like the best deal. Even in elections, where a strategically placed third-party candidate can pull just enough votes from one side to shift the results. But here's where it gets disturbing. The decoy effect doesn't just shape our purchases. It influences our perceptions of value, quality, and even morality. Have you ever seen a public figure get away with something terrible just because someone else did something worse? That's the decoy effect. By introducing a more extreme alternative, the original choice suddenly feels more acceptable, even if it was never truly a good option. And the worst part? The more decisions you make under the influence of this trick, the more your brain starts to justify them. You convince yourself that you chose the best deal, that your vote was independent, that your moral compass was unshaken. But in reality, you were nudged, manipulated, and guided toward an outcome that was never really your choice to begin with. So the next time you're faced with 3 options, look closer, because one of them might not actually be a choice at all. The placebo effect. They handed you a pill. You swallowed it, and within minutes, the pain started fading. Relief washed over you, your body responding just as expected. But what if I told you that pill was nothing more than sugar? No medicine, no active ingredients. And yet, your brain believed it worked, so it did. This is the placebo effect, one of the most unsettling psychological phenomena ever discovered. It proves that belief alone has the power to change the body. And while it might sound like an interesting quirk of human psychology, its implications are far darker than you think. Let's start with a well-known case. In the 1950s, a man named Mr. Wright was dying of terminal cancer. His doctor, out of desperation, gave him an injection of what was supposed to be a breakthrough drug. The results were miraculous. His tumors shrank, and he made a full recovery. But here's the twist. The drug was completely ineffective. When Mr. Wright later found out, his cancer returned almost instantly, and he died shortly after. This is the power of belief. When the mind is convinced something is working, the body follows. Studies have shown that people given fake painkillers release real endorphins. Placebo surgeries, where doctors pretend to operate, have led to genuine improvements in patients. Even Parkinson's patients have seen symptoms improve, simply because they thought they were receiving medication. And yet, here's where it gets deeply unsettling. This effect can be weaponized. If belief can heal, then it can also harm. This is called the nocebo effect, the dark twin of the placebo effect. Instead of convincing people they're getting better, you convince them they're getting worse. Tell someone a harmless pill will make them sick, and their body will create real symptoms: nausea, pain, even full-blown diseases. This has been used throughout history. In voodoo cultures, shamans have cursed people to death simply by making them believe they were dying. In medical scams, con artists sell completely fake treatments, making people think they're recovering until it's too late. And in modern pharmaceutical trials, patients sometimes experience serious side effects, not because of the drug, but because their minds expect them. Think about what this means. If belief is strong enough to change your biology, then how many times in your life have you been tricked? How often has your pain, your relief, your sickness, even your recovery, been dictated by expectation rather than reality? And more importantly, who's been shaping those expectations? Loss aversion. They put 2 choices in front of you. Option A, you gain $100. Option B, you lose $100. Which one feels stronger? If you're like most people, the pain of losing that money hits twice as hard as the joy of gaining it. This is loss aversion, a psychological trick that makes you fear losing far more than you desire winning. And this fear, it controls more of your decisions than you realize. Think about casinos. They know this effect inside out. When you start winning, they flood you with flashing lights and celebratory sounds, conditioning your brain to crave more. But when you lose, they don't make a big deal out of it. No alarms, no dramatic music, just silence. Why? Because they know you're already in psychological pain. And here's the kicker. People who lose money don't just walk away. They chase their losses. They keep gambling, desperate to avoid feeling that loss permanently. Loss aversion isn't just about gambling. It shapes everything from marketing to relationships. Ever wondered why companies offer limited time deals? Why e-commerce sites tell you, only 2 left in stock? It's because your brain panics at the idea of losing an opportunity. You might not even need the product, but the moment you think it's about to slip through your fingers, you suddenly need to have it. Now take this further. In toxic relationships, manipulators weaponize loss aversion to keep people trapped. They create fear, not of what they give, but of what they could take away. They make you believe that without them, you'd be alone, unloved, or worse. This is why people stay in situations that harm them. It's not because they're happy. It's because the idea of losing what they have no matter how bad, feels more terrifying than walking away. And if you think you're immune, think again. Every day, politicians, advertisers, and even social media exploit this exact principle. Act now, or miss out forever. Your rights are being taken away. Everyone else is ahead of you. The world isn't just feeding you choices, it's making sure you fear the wrong ones. So the question is, how many of your decisions were truly yours, and how many were just a desperate attempt to avoid losing? The power of touch, the warmth of a handshake, a reassuring pat on the back, a brush of fingertips on your arm. These small, almost imperceptible touches might seem harmless, even insignificant. But what if I told you that they hold the power to control your thoughts, influence your decisions, and change the way you see the world? This is the power of touch, a psychological weapon so subtle that most people never even notice when it's being used against them. And yet, it can shape behavior in ways that are almost impossible to resist. Let's start with an unsettling study. In a classic experiment, waiters in restaurants were told to lightly touch customers on the shoulder or forearm while returning their change. The result? Tips increased by as much as 40%. Another study had job interviewers give a brief, seemingly insignificant handshake to candidates. Those who received a firm, confident touch were consistently rated as more competent and hireable, regardless of their actual performance. The explanation lies deep in human psychology. Touch is the oldest, most primal form of communication. Before language, before speech, touch was how humans bonded, how we reassured, how we signaled dominance or submission. And that instinct hasn't disappeared. It's just been repurposed. So how does this trick work? It's all about subconscious trust and compliance. When someone touches you, especially lightly and briefly, it creates an instant sense of connection. You might not consciously notice it, but your brain does. It registers warmth, familiarity, even authority. In fact, research shows that when a doctor lightly touches a patient's arm while giving a diagnosis, the patient is more likely to believe them and follow their advice. It's the same reason politicians shake hands obsessively and salespeople make subtle, reassuring contact. Now here's where it gets dark. This effect works even when you don't want it to. Studies have shown that even unwanted touch, when not overtly aggressive, can lower a person's ability to resist persuasion. Criminals, con artists, and manipulators use this to their advantage. A cult leader might place a hand on your shoulder while speaking, making you feel indebted to them. A skilled interrogator might use a light touch on the arm to make you more likely to reveal information. Even scammers use touch, often brushing against their targets while talking, subtly making them more cooperative. This technique is also used in power dynamics. Ever noticed how powerful people in business or politics will place a hand on someone's back as they walk through a door? That's not just a friendly gesture, it's a display of dominance. They are, quite literally, guiding the other person, showing who's in control. And more often than not, the person being touched subconsciously accepts that control. And yet, here's the most disturbing part. It works even when you know about it. Even now, after hearing all of this, your brain is still wired to respond to touch the way it always has. The next time someone touches your arm, your mind will still associate it with warmth, trust, or authority. You might question it later, but in the moment, your defenses are already lowered. So the next time you feel a hand on your shoulder, a fleeting touch on your arm, or an unfamiliar warmth in a handshake, ask yourself, was that an accident? Or was it a calculated move to make you just a little more obedient? The foot and mouth effect. Most people think that being polite and friendly will always work in their favor. But what if I told you that simply making small talk, expressing warmth, or even asking someone how they're doing could make you more vulnerable to manipulation? This is where the foot and mouth effect comes into play. A psychological trick that exploits our own need to be perceived as kind, agreeable, and emotionally invested. And once someone knows how to use it against you, They can shape your decisions without you even realizing it. One of the most well-documented examples of this effect comes from a study conducted by social psychologists Howard and Gengler. They found that when people were first asked a simple, seemingly harmless question, like, "How are you feeling today?" they were significantly more likely to comply with a later request, even if that request had nothing to do with the conversation. This is because once someone verbalizes something about themselves, especially something positive, they subconsciously feel the need to maintain that image through their actions. If you tell someone you're having a good day, it becomes harder to refuse a favor right after, because denying them would contradict the positivity you just expressed. This trick is widely used in sales, negotiations, and even interrogations. A skilled salesperson won't just jump into their pitch. Instead, they'll start with light conversation, asking about your day, or making small personal observations. The moment you respond with something like, "I'm doing well, thanks for asking," you've unknowingly put yourself in a psychological trap. You now feel the need to remain consistent with the friendly, cooperative persona you just projected. So when they ask if you'd like to just take a quick look at a product or consider an option, you're far more likely to comply, even if you originally had no intention of doing so. In high-stakes environments, like police interrogations or intelligence gathering, this trick becomes even more sinister. Interrogators might begin with harmless, casual questions designed to get the suspect talking in a relaxed and cooperative manner. Once the person starts responding positively, they unconsciously want to maintain that cooperative stance, making it easier for interrogators to extract information or subtly lead them toward a confession. It's a psychological doorway. Once you step through, it's hard to turn back without feeling like you're contradicting yourself. But why does this happen? The foot-in-mouth effect works because humans are deeply wired for consistency. Once we say something out loud, especially in front of others, we feel an internal pressure to align our actions with our words. Social norms reinforce this behavior, making us uncomfortable with seeming dishonest, rude, or contradictory. If you say, "I love helping people," and someone follows up with a request for help, rejecting them feels like you're going against your own nature, even if helping them was never part of your plan. This tactic isn't just used on individuals, it works on large-scale manipulation as well. Political campaigns and propaganda often begin by getting the public to agree with simple, seemingly harmless statements like, "We all want a better future." Once people acknowledge that idea, they're primed to support more specific policies that align with it, even if those policies weren't something they originally agreed with. By getting people to say yes to broad, agreeable ideas first, they can subtly guide them toward more extreme commitments later on. So, how do you protect yourself from falling into this trap? The first step is recognizing when it's happening. If a conversation starts with an unusually friendly or probing question before leading into a request, take a mental step back. Remind yourself that just because you express positivity doesn't mean you owe anything in return. Learn to separate polite conversation from compliance, and don't let your own words be used against you. In the end, the foot-in-mouth effect is a psychological trick that thrives on the simple act of speaking. It turns your own words into a tool of persuasion, trapping you in a cycle of consistency. The moment you say something, you feel compelled to act in a way that aligns with it, even if it's against your best interests. And once someone knows how to use that against you, it's disturbingly easy to push you toward choices you never intended to make. The endowment effect. The endowment effect is one of the most insidious psychological tricks because it exploits something deeply personal, our attachment to what we believe is ours. Once we own something, even for a short time, we assign it more value than it objectively deserves. This quirk in human behavior can be used to manipulate decisions, emotions, and even financial choices in ways most people never see coming. Imagine this. You walk into a store and a salesperson hands you an expensive-feeling pen, telling you to test it out. As you roll it between your fingers, writing a few lines, it starts to feel like yours. Suddenly, when the price is revealed, it seems reasonable, even if you never intended to spend that much on a pen. That's the endowment effect at work. Simply touching or using something tricks your brain into believing you own it, making it harder to let go. But it doesn't stop with physical objects. The endowment effect is weaponized in everything from marketing to high-stakes negotiations. Free trials, test drives, and limited-time demos all work because they create a sense of ownership before you've spent a dime. Once something feels like yours, giving it up feels like losing a part of yourself. Retailers know this, which is why they let you borrow their products before committing. It's even more dangerous when applied to ideas and beliefs. People become irrationally attached to opinions simply because they've held them for a long time. This is why changing someone's mind, even with undeniable facts, is so difficult. If they feel ownership over a belief, letting go of it feels like a personal loss. The endowment effect also plays a role in relationships. People stay in toxic friendships and unhealthy romances because they feel invested. They've spent years building something, and the thought of walking away feels like losing everything. But the truth is, that's just the illusion of value. The same trick that convinces you an old, broken phone in your drawer is worth more than it actually is. When this trick is used strategically, it can be devastating. Cults, con artists, and manipulative leaders rely on it to keep followers locked in. By making people feel like they own their choices, their place in a group, or even their suffering, they make escape feel impossible. The deeper the investment, the stronger the illusion of value. And here's the most unsettling part. The endowment effect works even when you know about it. It doesn't matter if you're aware of the trick, your brain still clings to what feels like it belongs to you. The only way to break free is to recognize when you're valuing something more just because it's in your possession. Because sometimes what feels precious is just a well-placed illusion. Mind control. What if I told you that your thoughts, your beliefs, your opinions, even your memories could be rewritten? That right now, without realizing it, someone could be bending your mind to their will. No force, no obvious manipulation, just subtle, calculated influence. Sounds like science fiction, right? But it's real, and it happens far more often than you think. Take the Stanford prison experiment, one of the most infamous psychological studies ever conducted. In 1971, researchers at Stanford University recruited 24 ordinary students, dividing them into guards and prisoners for a simulated prison. No one was forced. No one was brainwashed. And yet, within days, the guards, regular college students, became cruel, authoritarian, even sadistic. They humiliated the prisoners, forced them into stress positions, even denied them basic necessities. And the prisoners, they broke down emotionally and mentally, accepting their abuse as if it were real. All of this happened not because anyone told them to, but because of psychological erosion, the slow, insidious breakdown of personal identity under the right conditions. The first step: isolation. Remove people from their normal environment, and they become vulnerable. Their reality shrinks. Their world narrows to whatever they're told. The prisoners in the experiment weren't physically trapped, but psychologically, they were. And it's not just experiments or cults where this happens. Governments, corporations, even toxic relationships. Control thrives where people stop questioning. The human brain craves patterns, repetition, familiarity. If you hear something often enough, it starts feeling true, even if it isn't. That's why propaganda works. That's why conspiracy theories spread. That's why some people defend beliefs that are actively harming them. Then there's fear, the most powerful tool of all. When people are afraid, they seek security. And the easiest way to control someone, offer them certainty. Authoritarian leaders create external enemies. Cult leaders predict the end of the world. Manipulative partners turn you against your friends. The goal is the same: keep you scared, keep you dependent, keep you from thinking too much. Because once fear takes hold, your mind narrows. You stop questioning. And once that happens, control is complete. That's what makes this the darkest psychology trick of all. It doesn't force you to change. It makes you want to. And by the time you realize what's happened, if you ever do, it's already too late. The power of playing dumb. There's a saying, never underestimate the power of a fool. But what if the fool isn't really a fool at all? What if playing dumb is a carefully crafted manipulation tool, a way to control situations, lower people's defenses, and gain the upper hand without them ever realizing it? The power of playing dumb is one of the most underestimated psychological tricks, yet it's been used for centuries by politicians, criminals, and even everyday manipulators. One of the most well-known examples of this trick in action is the legendary detective Columbo. He was famous for his disheveled appearance, slow speech, and almost clueless demeanor. Every suspect underestimated him, dismissing him as a bumbling officer, until he caught them in their own contradictions. That's the essence of this tactic. When you appear less competent or less intelligent, people reveal more than they intend to. They drop their guard, assuming they are in control. But how exactly does this work? First, playing dumb gives the illusion of harmlessness. If someone appears clueless, they don't seem like a threat. People are naturally inclined to take charge when they perceive someone else as struggling, which puts the dumb person in a position to be underestimated. This is especially effective in negotiations, social interactions, and even legal situations. By pretending to be oblivious, the manipulator gathers information without suspicion. They let others over-explain, fill in details, and unknowingly expose their weaknesses. Then there's the art of selective incompetence, pretending not to know how to do something so that others step in and take responsibility. Employees use this trick all the time to avoid extra work. A person who doesn't know how to set up a presentation, cook a meal, or fix a computer might be fully capable, but by feigning ignorance, they push the responsibility onto someone else. It's a passive form of control, one that forces others to step in, do the work, and ultimately hand over power. This trick also thrives in social manipulation. Have you ever noticed how some people pretend to misunderstand or misinterpret a situation just to avoid accountability? By acting confused or unaware, they dodge blame. When caught in a lie, a manipulator might say, "Oh, I had no idea that's what you meant," or "I must have misunderstood." This forces the other person to second-guess their own stance, making them appear unreasonable for holding the manipulator accountable. But the darkest side of this trick is its ability to exhaust and frustrate its target. Imagine trying to argue with someone who pretends they just don't understand your point, no matter how clearly you explain it. The more you try to clarify, the more they feign confusion. Eventually, you give up, frustrated, exhausted, and sometimes even doubting yourself. This is psychological warfare in its simplest form. It creates a mental loop where the victim becomes increasingly anxious, struggling to make sense of something that isn't actually rooted in confusion, but in deception. In politics, this tactic is often used to deflect responsibility. Leaders may feign ignorance about scandals or mistakes, claiming, "I was never informed," or "I don't recall that happening." It buys them time, shifts blame, and creates uncertainty about the truth. When done skillfully, it allows them to escape scrutiny while their opponents waste energy trying to prove what should have been obvious. At its core, the power of playing dumb is about control. It exploits trust, lowers defenses, and manipulates people into revealing too much or taking on burdens they shouldn't. It's a reminder that not every fool is foolish. Sometimes the person pretending to be lost is the one leading you exactly where they want you to go.